Hi y'all, my name is Data, and I'm just a lonely piece of information. Because I'm lonely, I want to travel to the mind and meet up with other kinds of information, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to find my way out. How will I ever be retrieved? I'd sure like someone else to help me out. Hey, who are you?
I'm Associated Idea, and I want to be your friend. I'm like you, but a little different. I'm going to the same place you're going, but I'm getting there by a different path. But you know what's great? Now there will be 2 ways to get into the mind and get out. And if we find more friends, we'll have even more ways to get out of the mind.
Oh, that would be wonderful. It would be so hard to get out by myself. I'm so glad you can help me, Associated Idea. But, what if I can't find you, or you can't find me? What will I do? Oh, wow! Mama Context!
Yes, Data. It's Mama Context. Here to remind you, because I'm an elephant, where you came from. And don't you ever forget it.
Mom, I'm so scared of getting lost in the mind and never getting out.
Don't worry, dear. Anytime the mind comes to me, I'll be able to send all my Associated Idea children to find you.
Oh boy, there's just so much more help to get out of here the mind than I realized. I'm so lucky to have Associated Idea and Mama Context to help me out. Mother Context, I'm so relieved when you are reinstated, because I will be retrieved. Associated Idea, you form my dear memory network. You friended me, and together we can spread our activation quickly. No response threshold is too high when we're together. Cueing me, cueing you. To be retrieved.
Hi, key terms, theories, and facts. You're not just a piece of information. Ha 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 ha. You are part of a vast memory network. And when you try to enter the mind, don't do it alone. Make some friends along the way. So when an Associated Idea cues one of you, it will be so much easier to get another one of you out as well. This is called spreading activation. It's when memories are connected through associated links from many processing pathways. The more pathways, the more ways you can get out of the mind when you're needed. Let's go see Mr. Brian and find out more. Ha 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 ha.
No memory is an island. When you acquire knowledge, you're not just acquiring isolated facts, but are storing an entire situation in your mind. This includes ideas you associate this information with, but also the context in which you learned that information. This is one reason why, in preparing for a test, you should make your study environment similar to your testing environment. Will you be taking that test sitting down? Then it would be best if you studied sitting down. Studying while having the smell of coffee around you, try having a cup of coffee when you're taking the exam, if that's allowed. Each of these situational factors offers a potential cue that can increase the likelihood of recalling information. Those cues prime the retrieval pathways whereby that information can be accessed, just like, as we learned earlier, being exposed to a word will make it more likely to recognize that word later. This is known as the encoding specificity principle, which states that factors associated with learning information help retrieve that information later on. One example of this is known as context-dependent learning. Here, the physical environment can assist retrieval as demonstrated by the example of studying. One well-known study demonstrated this by having two groups, one that studied a list of words on dry land and the other that studied the list submerged underwater in scuba gear. Later on, both groups were asked to recall the list. However, some group members who studied the list on land had to retrieve the words while underwater, while others had to retrieve the words where they originally learned them on land. The other group that studied the list underwater, some of those members had to retrieve those words on land, while other members retrieved that list underwater where they originally learned them. The research question guiding this study was this: does the learning and retrieval environment similarity help memory performance? And indeed, this is what they found. Even those who learned the words underwater did better when asked to retrieve those words underwater. Such a finding generalizes to many other kinds of situations, such as one group learning words when intoxicated and another group learning them when sober. Acquiring knowledge when happy, it's easier to retrieve it when happy, or acquiring knowledge when sad, it's easier to retrieve that when you're sad. Feeling depressed leads us to retrieve depressing memories. And when my wife is angry at something I did, she remembers every mistake I've ever made. The implications of this finding are much more significant than may initially appear. One of the central tenets in many forms of psychoanalysis is the role of the therapeutic relationship in treatment. It aims to create a situation in which transference may occur. This is where aspects of the therapist, the way they talk, look, or act, activate in the patient specific schemas formed in childhood that lead the client or patient to experience and relate to the psychoanalyst in terms of those schemas. The therapeutic relationship serves as a cue for the mind to retrieve, outside of conscious awareness, a set of stored memories that at some level remind the patient of an earlier experience. Because the patient is not aware of the source of the feelings and thoughts associated with these schemas, they may attribute their cause to the psychoanalyst instead. The psychoanalyst wants to reinstate aspects of the context where specific unhealthy mental frameworks first developed in order to make them alive in the therapy room and bring them to conscious awareness, which also opens the opportunity for facilitating new relational experiences that may start to alter those mental patterns. Memory networks are made of nodes, individual pieces of information, which are connected to each other by associative links or processing pathways. When one node is activated, it lowers the response threshold of other nodes connected to them, making them more likely to be retrieved as well. This is known as spreading activation. The more connected these nodes are, the lower the response threshold for one node when another node is activated. This increased ease of retrieval by cueing is called its processing fluency. That is, how easy it is for an associative link to fire. We can have some conscious experience of this when learning material for the first time and noticing how hard it is to retrieve it, but over time and with practice, it becomes more accessible. Fortunately, some controllable factors can influence how quickly this processing fluency develops, such as various forms of elaborative encoding and relational processing. Elaborative encoding is where one intentionally seeks to make connections between different pieces of information through associations, such as connecting a visual image or personal example to the abstract verbal information. The method of loci and mind mapping techniques are examples of this. Relational processing involves forming connections between different pieces of information in a systematic, logical manner, such as an outline. Suppose a student spends their time memorizing individual facts. In that case, it becomes a lot harder to recall those facts than if they instead focus on understanding the relationships among those facts, how they relate to each other, how they're ordered hierarchically. For example, it would be helpful to keep in mind that all the concepts we're talking about in this video pertain to memory storage and retrieval. We focused on the encoding specificity principle and given some examples of it, including context-dependent learning. We then discussed an explanation for the encoding specificity principle through the notion of memory networks, which consist of associative links and informational nodes. Memory networks work through a process of spreading activation. So there's an order to the concepts, with some concepts being more general and some information being more specific. In the next video, we'll discuss a potentially harmful consequence of this kind of learning and retrieval when cued information comes to mind quickly, but we have no conscious recollection of where we learned it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.